Good afternoon, and thank you for standing by. At this time, all participants are in a listen-only mode. After the presentations, we will open all lines for questions. Today's conference is being recorded. If you have any objections, you may disconnect at this time. I would like to introduce your host for today's conference, Mr. Jared Liu. Sir, you may begin.
Great, thanks. And thanks everyone for joining. This is the Getting Into Green Roofs Brown Bag Lunch Series. It's a monthly webcast that the Alliance for Community Trees sponsors, along with the Home Depot Foundation and the USDA Forest Service. We do it on the third Thursday of every month, and today we are pleased to have Katrine Scholes-Bart and Ed Snodgrass with us. They're both highly acclaimed in the green roof field. Katrine is a nationally recognized, preeminent expert in green roof technology, which she's helped to establish in the U.S. Her work demonstrates that green roofs are an integral and functional building element that protects watersheds while increasing biodiversity and the quality of life in urban areas. Ed is a horticultural consultant. He's the owner and president of Emery Knoll Farms and Green Roof Plants. Emery Knoll Farms has supplied plants for over 1.5 million square feet of green roof on over 250 roofs in 25 states, D.C., and internationally. He's on the board of the Maryland Nursery Association and has a book on green roof plants published by Timber Press. Like I said, we're very pleased to have them here both. I think green roofs is an ideal topic for this audience that primarily works in urban settings and would like to work more closely with high-density development. The order of presentations today, we're going to have Katrine speak, then we'll open up all the lines for questions and answers, then Ed will speak, and after that we'll have all the lines open for questions and answers. When the lines are open, you can ask a question either yourself by unmuting your phone, or you can ask a question online to the question manager in that chat room, and I'll ask it for you. So with that, I will turn it over to Katrine.
Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for joining us for this webcast conference today on September 20th. I would like to, before I start, I would like to just point out and stress the importance of collaboration between the tree people and organizations and the green roof people and organizations. Though these are two very different approaches, they are non-competitive but rather complementary and multi-tiered approaches where you combine green roofs and trees will really do remain for the maximum return in investment and for the return or for the maximization of the benefits of both green roofs and trees. Next slide, Jared. What I would like to do is I am an engineer and civil environmental engineer by training, and therefore as my company's philosophy, I mostly focus on functional green roofs to really use green roofs for stormwater management and for runoff reduction. Again, a tiered approach means I use green roofs for reducing the impervious surface areas where the rain falls onto it, and then usually use trees and bioretention areas at ground to further increase time of concentration for runoff and further decrease the runoff and pollution going into our in our streams. And so with that approach, I try to minimize the layers for a very cost-effective application. Next slide. And without putting much time into it, I just wanted to show you a variety of different projects that I've worked with. I'm working right now with the Federal Reserve Bank in Richmond, and just recently have finished the National Institute of Health, for which I wrote specifications and conducted construction administration, which is very important for really doing the construction for the green roofs itself. Next slide, Jared. The services that my company provides is from really ranging from design charrettes to grant writing and training, and again, design specification, construction administration. Now, what I as a consultant found most important in terms of the services that I provide is really the design charrette, and that is because most of the time when I do get on call, people asking, well, I want to do a green roof, can you tell me how heavy it is and how expensive it's going to be? This is not just one answer, but it really is a start for a long discussion, because as long as I don't know what the mission of the project is, I really don't know what to tell you in terms of weight or construction costs, because I usually design my green roof backwards, where I go into a design charrette again to really figure out what is the concept, what is your goal, what you want to achieve with the green roof, what is the anticipated use, and what are the benefits that you want to achieve, and then also look at the environmental issues that you may have at stage in your geographic area, and really see and cross-reference if the benefits that you're after with a green roof really cross-reference with the issues that you might have at stake, so that you can actually combine a green roof installation to mediate any of the environmental issues that you have to adhere to in your area to make a green roof installation cost-effective. And defining a green roof design goal and a design intent within a design charrette is something that is really helping you in terms of streamlining the design process and to really making it cost effective. Next slide, please. And so when you think about why would anybody even do a green roof, you know the benefits of green roofs, that you can really use it as a way to lower runoff, that you can use it for energy efficiency and also for reducing your operating costs. It is something that is very challenging to our conventional thinking, because we really have to find a balance between the design intent, the first cost, the anticipated use, and then also maintenance and care, because every decision that you make in your design process really also carries some consequences in the end for maintenance and for care for the green roof, which you may not anticipate. And so if you also line all of this out from the very beginning, and you understand what the consequences are of your first stated goals for the green roof, then we can revisit this whole thing without having half of it installed and realizing that you went down the wrong way. Next slide. And so while we're talking about the reasons why green roofs have been installed or may be attractive to various different places, instead of showing you a lot of slides with words, I'm just wanting to show you a few different slides of actual green roofs that have been installed, and just giving different reasons why people and owners have been attracted to it. And here you can see one of the buildings that Ed and I did in Baltimore, the Montgomery Park Business Center. And really the developer was, his main goal was to attract obviously a anchor tenant in a very big building. And then so for him to put a green roof on top of it was not so much a first cost basis, but it was really a calculation of cash flow for a building of 1.3 million square feet that had to be filled, and having an anchor tenant in that took up about half of the space was very important for him for the cash flow. So he really wanted to secure that lease of this anchor tenant. And and so, again, the questions that we asked on this too, and Jared, you can clip through maybe the next 3 slides slowly too as I speak. And so what you really need to ask yourself when you do approach a green roof design is, again, questions like, what do you want to achieve with the green roof, and who is your audience? Again, is it for demonstrating in public image, or is it demonstrating a particular philosophy of the organization, or if you want to actually use it for access and recreation? Now this slide here we might hold for a second. You can see this is a mixed-use development in Tacoma here in Washington, D.C., which was actually the first one that was permitted as a stormwater management approach. And it's a deeper profile green roof, and it may not be easy to see very well, but on the left-hand side, this is a green roof over the parking garage, and it's about 2 feet deep, and it receives all the roof runoff from about 1/3 of the building itself, and it's used, and the green roof is used for filtration and for water retention, and then the water flows actually towards the right of the green roof into a bioretention area for further cleaning and retention. And so, again, like when you ask yourself what you really want to achieve with this green roof and who is your audience, and is it a new building, is it an old building, is it maybe some incentive programs that make you think about it, that's really important to understand when looking into a green roof itself. Aesthetics is also one big reason why more residential homeowners get into it. Theirs is not really a financial part of it because there's not really a financial incentive for installation, but just the enjoyment and for a greater comfort within their own house that might be a reason for residential homeowners to get into it. But one of the other questions also is, how will success be measured? If you want to be fiscally responsible to your clients or to yourself, if you're the homeowner wanting to put it on your own home, then it is really in question of, is it a demonstration project, or is it something that you want to show for other people to easily and cheaply replicate it? Or is it something where you want to experiment with data or plant material? Now, Ed might go into this into this discussion a little bit further in his presentation. But the discussion about plant material is really one important one, where you have to really get plants that are native to the environment that you create. And I'll just leave it at that. Next slide, please. Next slide too. Habitat, again, is something that also attracts lots of people. Education, again, in terms of the audience, that is one very effective way of introducing young children, just like recycling, really introducing a new technology to a very young audience, and really make them aware of what those kinds of things can do. Next slide. Also, as part of education, I put this slide up because when we talk about costs, we can talk about a very wide variety of costs, and that's really based on the situation on site. This project, what I did here with my students at Harvard University at the Graduate School of Design, was basically a retrofit of a gravel ballasted roof, and prices for that can really range just from $1 to $2, because basically what we use is the existing gravel ballast, amending it with some lightweight aggregate or some compost and just sedum cuttings. And again, material costs here could be as low as 25 cents per square foot plus labor cost to put it all together. If you have a waterproofing system in place that is root resistant, this is one very important condition for those kinds of achievements. Next slide, please. And so when we talk about stormwater management, again, this is mostly for my work. It is very important to understand the issues, and I have just put this slide into it quickly because mostly in urban areas, obviously green roofs are most successful or most effective, just because of the enormous amount of imperviousness that we see, which generates about 75% runoff on an annual basis, because there is just no area for water to infiltrate. Now, if you look at roofing surfaces that would be readily available for retrofit, we could quickly reduce the amount of imperviousness and reduce the runoff that falls onto it, just by simply using the most frequently recurring rain event. Next slide. I put this graph up here because, again, I wanted to show that by focusing on the most frequently recurring rain event, and that is mostly true here for the Mid-Atlantic region, pretty much throughout the Midwest as well, is that most rain events do come in intensities less than half an inch. So if you want to do green roof for stormwater management, please do not confuse it with designing a green roof to a 100-year storm. Next slide, please. And so just a few pictures of the impacts of imperviousness onto our streams, and I'm sure you're familiar with it. Next slide. Same thing, aerial picture of Washington, D.C. with the impact of the sediment impact of all the impervious surface areas on the Anacostia River, indicated by the color change of the river. Next slide. And so, it is very easy to understand what you can actually do with a green roof. It's very easy to see that if you apply water on top of a planted area, it takes longer for it to really flow down. Whereas if you place water on top of an impervious surface area, it flows down right away. So you have a huge peak flow, and that really is the problem with our streams and rivers, because we see a lot of stream bank erosion. and that or stream channel erosion rather, and that's something that with a large application of green roofs in urban areas we can really help in mitigating. And so, again, if you think about the decisions that you make within your design process, it really also includes the preferences. Do you have a preference for modular system? Do you have preferences for proprietary systems? And really understand how all of those design decisions impact the end of the design process, namely the installation, other than care and maintenance. If you do choose certain plant material that need permanent irrigation, then permanent irrigation needs to be part of it. If you need plant material that is truly suitable for the roof environment that you create, then you might need to be really careful in terms of the installation schedule that allows for natural precipitation and for plants to grow and to start growing. And next slide, please. And so with that, actually, I just wanted to also show you a few examples, again, from very recent examples here from the Washington, D.C. area. And what you see right now is my very own house under which green roof I'm sitting right now. It was installed this year in April, and my greatest motivation here was to reduce the heat gain through the roof. Because the second story of a DC townhouse can be very hot, and the comfort feel that we have right now is just a dramatic difference between previous to the green roof and now. And I have not watered it all summer long, so it's alive and it looks pretty much the same as about 10 weeks old, and it probably starts growing right now. Next slide. I mentioned the National Institute of Health. We installed about 20,000 square feet of green roof for the new visitor center, the Gateway Center, and then has been growing in fantastically. This is about 4 weeks after installation. Next slide. Again, I mentioned that you have different ways to install green roofs. This is one example of a modular system which was installed for the National Park Service here in Washington, D.C., the Center for Urban Ecology, and that has been growing in very well as well. However, you have to be aware of the advantages and disadvantages of modular systems, for instance, too. If you have a plant and in part that it could happen that it becomes wood-bound, and in some cases here that happens also to the green roof itself, that one tray maybe in full would be fully established, some of it next to it is not so well, but there is no crossover possible because of the root binding approach of the modular system. So that again is something to be aware of, that if you do understand your priorities and wanting to match it with all of your intended use, that is important to understand. Next slide, please. And so if you look out of an airplane when you take off here in DC or wherever you might be, you realize that we have plenty of opportunities to do green roofs. And just a word again in terms of trees versus green roofs, or trees in connection with green roofs. For the it's not which one is better or worse, but it's really which one is more suitable for various applications. And I just also wanted to mention that within the city of Chicago, I've just helped install, or not install, but really lobby, I would say, for 15 acres of green roofs for the new cargo buildings that have been relocated, and the city of Chicago requires the airlines to install green roofs on all those areas. So those areas, 15 acres of roofs would not be, or of trees would not be possible, but 15 acres on top of roofs, especially low-rise buildings, is something that is suitable in this particular location. So we definitely need to, again, understand the importance and need to stress the need for collaboration between various groups. Next slide. Here I just put this one slide in again to really make sure that people understand that the discussion about native plants versus green roof plants, a plant native to a roof environment is not necessarily native to your geographic area. Just because you do only have 2.5 to 3 inches of soil for a low-profile green roof and maybe 12 inches of soil for a deeper profile green roof. And not all plants are adapted to this kind of environment. And so choose your plants suitable for the environment that you create, native to the environment that you create. And if it is not native to a geographic area, that's okay too. Next slide, please. And one quick note to the substrate. Now, green roofs, especially for urban retrofits, obviously many buildings have weight restrictions, and you can use different materials and really manipulate the weight per square foot based on the material that you use. On the very left-hand side of this slide, you can see gravel. And that could be used as a medium for plant material, but it is very heavy. It is about 10 pounds a square foot per inch depth. Same weight as for topsoil. And then if you don't have that 40 pounds per square foot, if you want to have 4 inches, then you can manipulate the weight by using lightweight aggregate, compost, sand, expanded clay, and expanded shale, those kinds of things to really make it work. Next slide. And before I finish, I just wanted to say one last word to maintenance. Obviously, when you work with a living environment, which plant environment is a living system, you do have to care and maintain it, especially in the beginning. So if you have a freshly planted roof on the left-hand side, before it is fully covered, like on the right-hand side, you really need to concentrate on weeding, watering, and occasional fertilizing. Now, most of the sedum plants that I use for my 2.5-inch deep green roofs do not really use a lot of fertilizer because they do also get some nitrogen phosphorus through atmospheric deposition. But weeding is one of the things that gets neglected most of the time, and that really perpetuates the problem throughout the life of the green roof. If in the beginning you have control over weeds and you pull it out frequently, at least 3, 4, 5 times a year during times which also coincides with most of the rain, because this is when weeds grow, you will have no problem further on. But if you are neglectant of weeding in the beginning, it can be detrimental to your green roof. Same thing with watering. Again, if you do not install a permanent irrigation system, which often I do not, then it is very pertinent to do water the plants initially for a couple of minutes, for a couple of months, just because they need to get going, and once they are established, then they can live on their own through extended period of drought. Next slide. And so the good news is you can always start small. You can do all kinds of different projects, and the more successful you are with small projects, the more adventurous you can become with larger projects. And I think that concludes my presentation. If you have any questions, the last slide has my phone number and also my website address on it. Thank you very much.
Great. We can open up all the lines for questions, please.
Thank you. At this time, all lines are open.
We have a question about throwing
yeah,
things.
and that's so the smaller one we got worked, and it takes you maybe a little while to get used to it.
Excuse me, there was a question about soil medium?
Yes. My question, if you could go back a few slides to where you talked about 80% gravel and 20% topsoil and expanded clay.
Video
Yeah.
conference.
I'm very interested in the weight, the pounds per square foot.
It's the
Yeah.
darndest thing, yeah.
The question was about soil medium and weight associated with each different kinds of lightweight aggregate of different soil material. Again, on the very left-hand side, you see gravel. That is about 10 pounds per square foot per inch depth. And so if you have an existing gravel ballasted roof and you want to reuse this like we did at the Harvard project, you could just take a little bit of gravel out and replace it either with lightweight aggregate or compost, just to give plants a little better way of starting to grow and to fill in basically also the little void spaces for greater water retention capacity. Then you can reduce that weight to about 9 pounds per square foot per inch, but not dramatically, because I mean the bulk of the stone is still on there. 80% of expanded clay, about 20% of topsoil. Usually what I do is a mix of 75, 25. And that is about 6 to 7 pounds per square foot per inch, and that is saturated. And then as you kind of continue, topsoil is about the same weight as gravel, about 10 pounds per square foot per inch. Only expanded clay is or broken tile, something like that, could be lighter. With about 5 to 7 pounds per square foot per inch, and then a mix of compost, which I try to do, is really somewhere between 6 to 7 pounds per square foot per inch.
Great, thank you.
And if everyone can make sure that their lines are muted, at this point, everyone is live, so we're going to hear you. If we keep getting static on the line, we can shut all the lines off, so people have to manually ask one at a time. But I think it's if everyone can just make sure their lines are muted. Thanks.
Can you list the phone number and the website? I couldn't get on to your website. It required some, something other than Mozilla. It required Safari, and I tried to install that, and that wouldn't work either.
I'm sorry, say one more time. You needed the last slide for my contact information.
I can't get any of your information because I couldn't get onto the website.
Oh, if you want to write it down, it's www.s as in Sam, CHOLZ as in zebra.
CH what?
SCHOLZ as in zebra, hyphen B as in boy, ARTH.com. And my phone number is 202-544-8453. 202-544-8453.
Okay. Your name?
Katrine Schultzbart. If you go on there, all the contact information are on there.
Thank you.
Great. We have a question. Have you been able to find commercially grown supply, or have you had to grow your own plant material? There are, like Ed will be talking to this just in a little bit. He is a commercial grower for green roof plants, and we have a few others that have started really focusing on green roof plants here in the Washington, D.C. area as well. And for soil and growth medium, for planting medium, this is also commercially available.
Can I ask a question about whether this causes any other roof problems like roof leakage or rotting or anything like that?
You've heard the question about roof failure because of the green roof. Well, I can tell you roofs fail because of the exposure to sun, UV, and the extreme temperatures. Within green roof application, however thin, you really reduce that direct impact on the green roof, on your waterproofing itself, and you really extend the life of the waterproofing. Now, obviously, you have to be very careful in terms of going on top of an existing waterproofing and installing a green roof. But it is, there are construction boards that you can put underneath it and really be careful in doing the installation. Most of the green roof installations that I have done so far are really done by the roofer themselves, just because they have an added impact or an added interest in not breaking what they've just installed. So, there are examples in Europe that there are 100-year-old roofs, and they never had to be serviced. So it's something that I'm quite confident about, but really the green roof itself doesn't impact the waterproofing, because again, you have a soil layer and you have a plant layer and you have a lot of trapped air within it, and so you have an ecosystem that works within it. And so while it might be attractive to wildlife and then some insects of some sort, but there is no penetration through the waterproofing if you choose the right waterproofing. That again is like one important condition, that you have a root barrier on it. But other than that, the green roof actually reduces also the humidity, the heat transfer through the roof, and so there is nothing that otherwise had been reported.
Do you recommend any specific waterproofing that the best, or?
Well, you can use any waterproofing system. Again, depending on what kind of you choose, you either have to install a root barrier, like every organic-based waterproofing system, like an asphalt-based roofing system, requires a root barrier, whereas a synthetic waterproofing system, like a rubber roof or a PVC roof or a TPO roof, a thermoplastic olefin, does not require an additional root barrier.
Katrina, I know that a lot of the discussion around costs is difficult to get into because it depends on what you want to go for in your green roofs and such. We do have a specific question about if there's any average cost per square foot for an installation of a 3-inch depth green roof.
Mm-hmm.
You're not able to answer that specifically. Can you talk a little bit about what the process is for figuring out what the cost?
Mm-hmm. No, actually, I would say for a 2.5 to 3 inch deep green roof system that's non-accessible, that you really do mostly for water, for water retention, for stormwater management, things like this. It could be anywhere between $8 to $11 a square foot. That's not including the waterproofing. That's just really the green roof part of it. But it would include a drainage board, various separation layers, and a drainage layer, erosion control, things like this. One example, I have just actually gotten today 3 bids, and so this is an accessible roof, but it has a roof terrace, but then in green roof at 2.5 inches, and there the cost varied somewhere between $14 to $18 a square foot.
And about how long would you say that extends the life of the existing roof when you put a green roof down?
Well, a green roof is just like another protective roofing assembly. If you have your insulation on top of your roof and then gravel ballast, this is also considered a gravel ballasted roof. But, I would say you can easily assume it doubles, if not triples, or fourfold the lifespan of the roof. Again, like in Europe, there are 100-year-old roofs that never had to be replaced.
And what's the average depth of substrate for a green roof?
As I said, that really depends on the preferences that you want to do. If you really truly want to just address the first half inch of most frequently recurring rain events, so it's about 2.5 to 3.5 or 4 inches of depth. I also just wanted to quickly say, in terms of cost, and the reason why there is relative great variation in terms of cost is also because logistics really make a huge make up a huge part of the installation cost. Each individual site, like New York City or even Washington, D.C., traffic, closing, cranes, and things like this really have a huge part of it, not so much the actual components of the green roof itself.
Okay, and I'll give one more question, and then we'll go over to Ed. Are there any special challenges to building and maintaining green roofs in cold climates?
No, and it's the same thing as you would do with regular outside areas. In the winter, it goes dormant, and most of the green roof plants are actually evergreen, so there is no different challenge. It will freeze, it will thaw. The good thing is that it actually cuts down in thaw and freeze cycle again, because it reduces the temperature differential between the roof and itself. And so the ice sheeting, for instance, in colder climates, that would be reduced because you have a green roof, and the snow usually stays longer on the green roof itself and does not melt right away, and you don't have this ice sheeting on top of roofs. So that's definitely something that would extend the roof life.
I was curious whether I could ask another question.
If you can hold it until afterwards, because I want to make sure we get Ed in, and I'm guessing we're going to have more questions than we have time to fill. So,
are you receiving the questions from the internet?
Yeah, I take some of them from online. But if we run out of time at the end, just make sure you ask your question online. I'll leave it there for a few minutes after the presentation ends, and I'll follow up with the presenters afterwards. But so we'll ask Ed to speak now for 10 to 15 minutes, and then we'll open up the rest of the time to questions and answers. So if the operator can mute all the lines, and then we'll turn it over to Ed.
At this time, all lines are back in listen only.
Well, good afternoon. Thanks a million, Katrine, for a wonderful presentation. I'm going to focus on just more of the plant and method side of the equation here, And just quickly go over some terminology. There are two terms that really describe the depth of the roofs, and they are intensive and extensive. Intensive systems tend to be over 6 inches, more commonly over 12 inches of media. They're irrigated, they're designed, they have gardeners. They're generally amenity spaces that people are participating in. An example is this bank in Basel, Switzerland. So while there are not people directly on there, you can see this looks more like a garden. If you crop the photo, you wouldn't even know it was on a roof. But the extensive is a whole other ball game. And when you think about growing plants on these, they're very thin. The media, like Katrin said, is mostly mineral because of weight, and you don't want your media to shrink over time, so you maintain the same level of stormwater performance over a long period of time. Because of that, it doesn't have any capillary action, and is much more subject to periods of drying heat, winter wet, things like that. So they become very difficult horticultural environments. And then you look for plants that really kind of adapt to that. I mean, many drought-tolerant plants in our country survive drought by having a taproot, and they just will not adapt to green roof conditions. I mean, this gets into the whole native plant argument. You also have to think when you're dealing with plants that they be low in nutrition, that they don't require a lot of maintenance by nature, that they can live a long time. There's no sense in designing a 50-year green roof with a 5-year plant on it. And you do have to understand how much the plant will weigh at maturity, because certainly an oak tree weighs more than an acorn. And you need plants that don't gain a lot of weight in their lifetime. There's the structural considerations. So there are really like 4 ways that we look at green roofs being installed in terms of plants. And this list, for those of you who can see it, I know some of you can't, the list goes from seeds and cuttings to plugs to modules to mats. And this fits in a common landscape paradigm. Is the question is, do you have time or do you have money? And so these, you can choose to put relatively inexpensive materials on and then take a year, 2, 3 years to have it grow in, or you can get instant effect, and of course you pay for that. So we'll go through some slides of, here's a job that's put down cuttings, and then they're hydromulched for stability so they don't blow off the roof. And then these will, depending on the density, these will grow in over time. You really don't get a lot of opportunity with these to do a specific design, but it's an inexpensive way to just get your green roof started. And then here are what they call plugs. Now, plugs are a horticultural term for small rooted plants in containers. These containers are 10 by 20 inches, and they hold 72 plants. So they're pretty small. They're essentially a rooted cutting with some soil around it, and they are much more foolproof than cuttings in that they can be put in, and since they have a root system and some media, they are much tougher in terms of surviving periods of dryness in the establishment phase. Katrin, this is actually the same roof that Katrin showed in, this is the Center for Urban Ecology in D.C., and these are pre-vegetated modular systems, and I think she described the benefits very well. They tend to, essentially you're moving the horticultural grow-in time off-site where it's done by professionals and then on-site on the roof. So in a case where maybe the client doesn't feel like he has the horticultural expertise or doesn't want to pay for maintenance in the first year, you can move that first year somewhere else. These tend to be a contract-grown product that you will book in advance, and so that you pay a premium for that. And there are probably at now 4 or 5 modular companies with, I think, a couple more in development. And then the other thing we have done is grow the specialty sod, the sedum sod, and then roll it up and haul it to the site and unroll it. And this is also done as a contract-grown method well in advance. And these things cannot stay in rolls that long, no more than really 2 days. 1 day is probably more optimal. And so it takes a lot of coordination between the general contractor and landscape contractor and the nurseryman and the trucking and all those things, but it does give an instant effect. And this particular job was for the World Trade Center in Boston. So the order of magnitude there between material costs, between cuttings and modules and mats, is almost 10 to 1. Just so you kind of, it's quite a thing. Now, I just want to go quickly through some different design options, and these are not industry terms; these are just my terms. So just have to bear with me in my nomenclature here. But essentially, you can take a bunch of sedums, you can mix them up, and plant them out like a meadow. And this is probably regardless of how you do it in terms of modules, mats, or plugs, or cuttings, this is a look that really doesn't require a lot of design maintenance afterwards. So you can see, here's an example of that. So this roof next year may not look exactly like this. The red spots may be smaller, the white larger. It has seasonality. But you can see it's just, it kind of has its own thing. And you won't have to be up there worrying about edges and things like that. And then you can take the same group of plants and you can really do more interesting things with them, but you're going to have to maintain edges, or if you let it go, it would just become a meadow mix. Now, just for my own terms here, inputs to me means things like fertility and water, so that means that the plants are designed to not require a lot of extra expense afterwards in terms of material cost. So here's an example of a sedum design roof with drifts of color. This is at the Pennsylvania Power and Light Company's building in Allentown, Pennsylvania. It's a gold lead building, and the window on the right is the corporate boardroom, so they're looking out over top of that roof. Then there's another strategy that says, well, we have maybe Katrin was talking about 15 acres at O'Hare Airport. When you get into these huge jobs, you may want to put plants up there that have some sort of viable seed. So if there are bare spots, they can fill in. But you do have to be cautious that you're not putting something up there where the seeds can escape off the roof and become a problem to the at-grade landscape. So you have to be very careful about your impact on the larger ecology. And here's an example of this. This is a 5-acre roof that we worked on in Culpeper, Virginia for the Library of Congress. This is their new audio and video archive building. And you can see sometimes it's difficult on these big jobs to even see where the roof ends and the landscape begins. But if you're driving down 29 from Washington to Culpeper and you looked up to your left in the summertime, you would not see most of this building. It would kind of disappear into the hillside there. Kind of a nice thing. And then we get into, I think Katrin touched on this, on natives. One thing about natives is that's a regional term, and it's a term that's widely defined. Because of that, there's no proven plant list. I mean, if you had a native plant list for D.C. of what was here before Columbus, well, D.C. was mostly wetland. So you're not thinking you're going to be putting a bunch of wetland plants up in 3 inches of granular media. But there are possibilities to do restoration. There's possibilities to do education, to provide specific habitat. But all that needs a lot more intellectual capital than the other kinds of roofs, especially on the maintenance side, because someone's got to get up there and weed those things and has to know a native plant from a non-native plant, which is not always the easiest thing to know. But there is an example. We did a Messick Prairie in Indiana, work with roofscapes. And by burying this building, this library, they saved enough money to do the roof. Now, the roof was very expensive, but it was not an extensive system. It was a deep system with a local genome for plants, and it really it turned out very nicely. But you really have to think about those things very carefully. The design considerations are very specific, and you have to be very attentive to details on those. And then you start to get into these maybe some hybrid systems where the loading area of the roofs that are thin, you can do some sedums, and where there's greater loading, you can get into other things. There's an example of this on a hotel in Vancouver where they grow all their kitchen herbs on their roof, and the chef actually saves a good bit of money every year on kitchen purchases, and actually builds menus based on what's fresh and available, and so you can see that you can go a number of different directions. And then even you can do these perennial gardens. Now this is in Sheffield, England, on a commercial office park, and it's part of the amenity for the building. So this, again, if you were maintaining this, that's a very complex garden to maintain. I think one of the things that people don't think enough about is the second cost of their green roof after installation. What kind of maintenance budget do you want to apply to it? How do you want the people to interact with it? Are they going to be out there smoking? Will some of those grasses turn dormant and flammable? I mean, you have to have all these considerations as the system gets more complex. Here's another example in the U.S. This is in Boston at Manulife Financial. Again, a hybrid system that with the sedums in the foreground and the grasses in the background, and kind of a spring, summer, fall, and winter shot, so you can see different looks. In the upper left-hand corner, that shot is across the channel there in Boston, and Logan Airport is across there. So you may see this if you ever fly into Boston. Take a look out your plane window. You may see this. And then there's a movement in Europe that really isn't here too much called brown roofing, where they're just really putting up the aggregate and letting plants just colonize there. They're doing this more for macroinvertebrate habitat, spiders and insects and the like. Now, we don't really have that much problem, but I thought it would be interesting to see what one of these looks like. This is so they're doing vegetated strips just to keep erosion down, and then all kinds of different sizes of aggregate to create different little niches for habitats. And then this is in Basel, Switzerland. In Switzerland in particular, there's a real dearth of songbirds, and so they're looking at opportunities to create a little bit of a food chain for the songbirds to bring the populations back. They don't have the kind of big expanses we have in the U.S. of open space and habitat. And I'm trying to play catch up here, so I went through the slides quickly. I hope I know this is going to be available later on. I want to give my contact information as well, and I'll put it up on the screen there. So we are happy to take requests for information, and we have an online catalog. We, as a company, don't print a paper catalog at all, so everything is available online. And I think we'll be happy to take questions at this point.
Great. Thanks, Ed. The operator can open all the lines, please.
At this time, all lines are open.
Everyone, please make sure you're on mute if you're not asking a question. And I'll start one going back to the chef who grows the chives and herbs on his rooftop. We did have a few questions asking also about green roofs and food. Are you aware of any other examples, or can you talk more to that?
Well, in terms of green roofs and food, certainly the herbs are easier than vegetables because all their requirements are much smaller. If you want to do vegetable production on roofs, that would most commonly occur in like a private residence, not so much on any commercial scale. And certainly I don't see grains and fruit trees and things like that very commonly. I mean, you just get into deeper and deeper systems, and you could have so much more efficiencies at grade. But if you live in the city and wanted to, you could probably make a case for growing a lot of your summertime vegetables, the cucumbers and tomatoes and the like. But herbs are much more efficient on green roofs. There are not many cases of food production on green roofs.
Can I add a little bit to the food production?
Sure.
This is Katrine. I just wanted to also caution in terms of food production, the objective that I have with that, or in discussion had with some previous clients, is what food production does is really disturbing the actual soil during times when it is most vulnerable, or leaving it bare at times where it's most vulnerable. So if one of your objectives for green roofs is, for instance, stormwater management and watershed protection, then food production on a green roof should not be, discussed or even debated, just because, again, you make the soil vulnerable for wind and then also rain erosion, and then have all of the impacts greater than you're actually wanting to mitigate it.
And it's a different soil. It would be a high humus, high organic media and not the mineral media. It would really be like container garden growing some tomatoes in a box, not so much a green roof like you've seen photos of.
May we have your website because we can't get on the...
Sure. Our website is greenroofplants.com, and plants is plural. And my email address is ed.snodgrass@greenroofplants.com. We're very searchable on the internet, so if you type in green roof plants in any search engine, you'll get us.
Could I ask a question about brown roofs?
Sure.
I'm curious as to what the downside of that would be. Is there the potential for invasives or plants that require substantially more soil or growing medium to migrate onto a site like that and then have to be removed?
Yeah, I think you've hit the nail right on the head. One of the problems with brown roofing is that you don't get to choose what comes in, and you may not know what comes in until it's already mature and throwing a lot more viable seed out. And you're giving up a tremendous amount of control on brown roofing. And the design intent of that is in an area that is really, really struggling with their insect population. So, like all green roofs, I think the trend said this really well. The first thing you do when considering a green roof is really think about your design intent and get that really crystal clear, and then everything issues from that. So in the case of brown roofing in Basel, they have an overall ecological objective that they're designing for, and the insects kind of dominate that discussion, and they'll deal with invasives on the roof, but the insects are more important. And I think in the United States, I have a hard time seeing that. I think we would worry much more about invasive plant species and less about insect population. So it really has to map to your local conditions.
Great, thank you.
Can you talk about projects and or techniques where trees are incorporated?
I think I'll say something very briefly and let Katrin talk about this more. But the only thing I'm not a structural engineer, but if you're using trees, I have generally only seen trees either on edges or over columns, because it's very hard to predict the weight of a mature specimen, or in containers where they can really understand. You essentially constrict the root zone so much that trees don't grow very big. But I'll defer to Katrin.
No, and I second that. I mean, most important is that the load of the point load of the tree is transferred onto a beam or a structural system that can support it. And most importantly, also most green roofs fail because of, or not green roofs, or bioretention areas. All of this where you work with plant material fail because of the wrong soil. And so, for trees, obviously you need a much greater amount of organic matter for the tree to survive in an area, and you probably will dwarf it in its form and shape than on a regular ground. So these are the two things: soil for the tree itself with its nutrient contents, and also load.
And I would say too, when you do trees, I would recommend they always be in a container, and the container be physically separated from the roof membrane.
Yes,
so
exactly.
So there's an air space, and roots will truncate in the presence of air. So you don't run, if you put a container directly on a roofing membrane and there's a drain hole in the bottom, you're running the risk of the tree root going down and into the roofing system. And so by elevating that, you help yourself out a good bit.
And irrigation is also important.
Yeah, have to be irrigated.
Morning, how are you?
Just fine, how are you?
I wanted to ask about a situation. I'm working with a coalition that's dealing with a major tunnel here in Oakland, California. The possibility of building a large green roof over freeway lanes, perhaps with a concrete platform. Any experience, or whether you could potentially provide design help to try to advance a proposal to the state or the feds for a large green roof over a freeway lane.
So you'd be talking about essentially on a bigger scale, like a little bus stop kind of roof over top of where the people are driving to shade the cars or something, or?
It's about like an 8-lane freeway, and trying to bridge this large area. Otherwise, there would be no evacuation routes in relation to local residents.
And what depth are you talking about there? Several feet?
Would it be over structure? You mean over
concrete? It could be like 25,000 square feet, a large site, and potentially trying to build something under it that would hold the weight of it over freeway lane.
Well, it's a longer discussion than a quick answer here, I suppose. But regular terrace planting has been done for a long time, where really structural is more important, especially transportation safety, than the actual greening part of it. So I'd probably go from that route, understanding that and building something underneath it, and then the green roof on top of it, whatever structural load capacity is available to green it.
I know from other projects in the Bay Area that you do have to be concerned about using flammable grasses in that area, because the fire department doesn't want to see any of that stuff. You don't want people throwing cigarettes out their car windows onto a flammable area in brush fire country. So plant selection gets.
So what would you use?
Well, you'd probably use either some succulents or some really far retardant perennials and things or
you install irrigation,
or you have irrigation to keep it wet all the time.
Yeah.
Okay.
Which is probably, you run into these. This is a perfect example where you run into jurisdictions where competing interests start to impact green roof design. So you have the fire department say, I don't want anything tinder dry up there. You have the water department saying, we don't want potable water used to irrigation. You have the highway department saying, we need access. And so you have to reconcile all these seemingly conflicting design intents. And that's where I think the trend services like Design Charrette, you need someone to help people kind of see a way through all that.
Is that what you could do, Katrina, to potentially develop the design?
Yeah.
Okay.
Are either of you familiar with any research if green roofs in hurricane-prone areas?
Well, that's a tough. I don't know of anything that's really been done on it, but wind uplift is a really tough issue there because green roofs go through periods of time where there is granular media exposed, and it's also then vegetated. And so I think you have to talk about green roofs and uplift as a mature system and not a system that's growing in because of the ability for it to scour. But we did have a green roof we did with Roofscapes in Fort Myers, a small demonstration project that went through Hurricane Charlie and then Ivan and held up very well. But I don't think there's any true scientific research with green roofs that I know of in hurricanes.
The one factor might be that really your insurance company determines that whether you can do it or not. Factory Mutual, as being one of the largest property insurance companies, they do actually issued a fact sheet about green roofs, and mostly focused on wind uplift, obviously. And they do not insure any gravel ballasted roofs or green roofs in hurricane-prone areas or high wind-prone areas. But they have just really looked at the particle size of the growing medium that is in the very beginning. Now, once a green roof is fully established, you hardly have any single little material that they call fizzle material, actually, because they really look at wind uplift of this material and breaking of glazing somewhere in neighboring buildings or your own. But once the green roofs really have grown in, they do form very dense, very dense root systems that really hold everything together, just kind of like a sod roll that you can hold up vertically and that doesn't fall apart, because really roots just have a tremendous tensile strength. So that would be something to consider, and maybe even do some research on in fully established green roofs.
I would say that's an area where you'd have to look carefully to modular systems to make sure the module doesn't weigh less individually than the than the wind uplift requirements.
Great. All right. Well, I'm going to cut it off at this point. We're at an hour exactly. I promised the speakers an hour, and I promised you all an hour. And I think that's important because attention spans, I think that's about where we're capped at. The presentation is recorded, so I will send a link out to everyone, everyone who's registered of where they can pick up that link. And anyone who has not gotten a chance to ask their question but would like something answered, put it online to the question manager, and I'll follow up with the presenters and email that around. So with that, I very much want to thank Katrine and Ed again for presenting. This has been fantastic. This is our largest session yet, so there's a tremendous amount of interest around this subject. Again, I'll remind you that this was a presentation put on by the Alliance for Community Trees. If you're not a member, we'd love for you to join. Check out our website. It's www.actrees.org. Click Get Involved and join now. And thanks to our sponsors, the Home Depot Foundation and the Forest Service. And finally, if you can take a couple minutes to answer 4 questions online that will help us to refine these, I'd really appreciate it. You see it's on your screen now. I've also put the link in the question manager so you can download it directly from there, and I'll leave this live for a couple of minutes so you can look at that. All right, thanks everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.